Famous predictions in 2024 that Trump would get elected, that he would start a war with Iran, and that he would lose a war with Iran.
Iran clearly has the strategic advantage. I think the next step in the escalation ladder is that Trump will send in ground forces.
Nikki Haley was key to your prediction about Iran. You said Trump would pick her as his running mate, but he didn't pick her.
I think that the problem with education is that it focuses too much on facts, too much on rigor, and not enough on imagination.
Too much on facts. Do you hear yourself? Does China control what you say now? Your critics might say they're using you as a propagandist.
It is possible I'm a useful idiot. And I suspect that there are many entities around the world who would like to amplify my message, including the Chinese government.
Hold on. You don't call yourself Professor Jiang on your YouTube channel?
I do now, but when I first started out, if you go way back to my early lectures...
It doesn't matter when you first started out. You do call yourself Professor Jiang and you're not a professor. What is your big prediction now for 2026? We'll see what happens. We can test it out at the end of the year.
So before we get into this video, I chose to react to this video because even though I like Mehdi Hassan, he said some really great stuff. But I do not like the way he kind of antagonized this Mr. Jiang. I'm not going to call him a professor because he's technically not a professor and people call him that. But I just wanted to just examine this and just analyze it on his merits, really. Mehdi Hassan, he wrote a book called How to Win Every Argument, which means even though you're wrong or what you're saying might not be right, you just have to win the argument. And I think that that's what he was trying to imply in this video. I know Jiang, I've known him since last year. That was when his video started popping up, when he predicted famously that Donald Trump was going to win and Donald Trump was going to go to war with Iran. And so far, 2 of those predictions has come through. And currently the third one, which is US is going to lose the war with Iran, is actually happening right now, because strategically the United States have lost, but they say the process of figuring out how much they're going to lose. But yeah, let's get into the video. And also, before we do, guys, I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers. I'm currently on 85 subscribers. I just started doing this and it would really mean a lot if you guys can just subscribe to the channel. Really motivate me to do more. I'm just trying to get to 100 subscribers for now, you know. Let's get into it.
Back in 2024, Chinese-Canadian educator Shui-Qin Jiang posted a video on his YouTube channel, Predictive History, where he laid out 3 big predictions. Donald Trump would win the 2024 election, the US would then go to war with Iran, and ultimately the US would lose that war. Since then, the self-styled professor who says he uses game theory to analyze the past and predict future geopolitical events has become an internet sensation, and has even been dubbed China's Nostradamus. But he's also faced some criticisms over his predictions and, many would say, pretty out there conspiracy theories. 2 out of 3 of Jiang's big predictions have come true. But how much of that is his own geopolitical foresight, and how much of it simply comes down to luck? How much does the Chinese government control or even influence what he says, what he predicts? I decided to not just speak to Shui-Qin Jiang, aka Professor Jiang, about Iran and the state of the world, but also to challenge him a bit. Here's our interview. Shui-Qin Jiang, thank you so much for joining me on Zeteo. You have said you use game theory to predict future geopolitical events. For those who have never heard of game theory, please do explain what it is and how it helps you explain what's happening with Donald Trump and with Iran in particular.
Right. So game theory applied to geopolitics means that we see each individual nation state as a player in a zero-sum game to maximize its individual interests. And so each player would have its own characteristics, its own strengths, and it would adopt a optimal strategy in order to win the zero-sum game.
So how does that apply in the Middle East right now?
Right. So the United States is attacking Iran, and these 2 nation states have different strengths and weaknesses. So America has the world's greatest military. It has aerial supremacy. It has tremendous technology. It has unlimited funding. And so Iran is adopting an asymmetrical strategy of holding the global economy hostage, meaning that rather than attacking the United States directly, which it cannot defeat directly, it is instead controlling the Strait of Hormuz, which is strangling the global economy, and it's attacking the GCC nations, the infrastructure of the GCC nations, in order to force Trump into the negotiating table. So that is the asymmetrical warfare of Iran.
And so far, Iran has been like doing this flawlessly well. They attacked the GCC countries, which means the facade of the GCC countries are a safe haven for investment, for tourism, all of that. That is gone now. I'm not going to say 100% gone, but that has been shattered, basically. And also, it's attacking the United States economically. That is why Trump yesterday was forced to blockade Iran's blockade, which is just insane. They've used their overwhelming military power to attack Iran for 40 days straight, and Iran still retained the ability to launch missiles and drones at any target they wish to. And that was what pushed Trump to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to go hit this desalination plant to make the people feel the pain. If the military guys could not feel the pain, I'm going to make the people. And then the whole world condemned Donald Trump for even altering those statements that's going to end civilization. Because there was no longer any military targets. So all of them are buried miles deep on the mountains that even bombs or even a nuclear weapon cannot even reach.
You've also predicted that the US, you had three famous predictions in 2024, that Trump would get elected, that he would start a war with Iran, and that he would lose a war with Iran. Based on what you've seen over the past month, do you still stand by that prediction?
Yes, I do. I think that after a month, I think that Iran clearly has the strategic advantage. And what I mean by that is that Iran is very clearly able to articulate its military objectives, and it has a very clear strategy of how to obtain these military objectives. And it is working very hard and very meticulously to obtain these objectives. This is the complete opposite of America, where Trump has failed to articulate an end goal. And right now, it seems that the Trump administration, is unable to articulate both a strategy and a purpose to the American public, which is causing most Americans to not support this war. It's also causing low soldier morale among the American forces.
What do you think happens next if/when Iran wins?
Right. So even though Iran has the advantage right now, we still have to remember that America is the world's greatest empire. It has a lot of resources. It has a lot of firepower still not used. So I think the next step in the escalation ladder is that Trump will send in ground forces. So over 5,000 Marines and soldiers have been dispatched to the Middle East. This is already on top of the 50,000 American soldiers already stationed in the Middle East. And most military analysts expect that the Americans will launch an amphibious assault in order to control the Strait of Hormuz. Now, there are several options available to the Americans in order to control the Strait of Hormuz. The first option is to control Karg Island, which is the oil depot of the Iranians. 90% of Iranians' oil exports depart from Karg Island. Then you have Qasim Island, which is just opposite the Strait of Hormuz. And then there's a naval base further down the coastline. And so these are the three options that the Americans have. And it is unclear which option the Americans will ultimately choose. But given the track record of the Marines, we can expect the Marines to have an early success. The problem with the strategy and the problem with America's overall strategy is what happens next? How do you maintain control over the territory that you've claimed? The reality is that the Iranians have been preparing this battle for about 20 years. They developed this very effective asymmetrical warfare strategy of using drones and ballistic missiles from afar, hidden in underground bases, to hit and strike American assets around the Middle East. This is almost like guerrilla warfare. And historically, a imperial power has had great difficulties in containing guerrilla warfare. Yeah. So unfortunately, the Americans don't have a long-term strategy of how to win this war. Trump is still hoping for a quick strike, a knockout punch, and he believes that the American Marines can deliver this knockout punch.
Donald Trump is caught in a escalation trap right now, according to Professor Pape. He has no other choice. Is either to concede defeat by conceding the Strait of Hormuz to Iran, or is sending ground troops. Ground troops have to go into where this underground bunkers are to get rid of, dismantle the missile, like physically there, or take these islands. But the thing is, they can't physically put all these troops, because once they get in, they're going to be bombarded by missiles, drones. Previously, was it not just a week ago when the F-16 pilot was stranded in Iran, and we had to blow up almost 2 or 3 planes just so we could get him out. This is how complicated it is to insert ground troops into Iran. They almost, like, they couldn't get everything out. They had to blow those planes up. Or we don't even know who blew it up. Probably it was the Iranians that even did it. But this just shows how hard it is to go into Iran.
Some have called you China's Nostradamus. How would you respond to those who say, sure, you guessed that Trump would win in 2024 and he'd go to war with Iran, but that wasn't based on geopolitical insights or game theory? People who follow American politics or world politics could have guessed that. I think I and many others were warning that Trump could win in 2024 and that he would escalate with Iran, as he did in his first term when he killed Qasem Soleimani.
Right. So I think that if you've been following the news very closely, then it was actually pretty straightforward to make these 3 predictions, right? Because in Trump's first term, as you mentioned, Trump did have a history of escalating conflict with Iran. The biggest escalation was when Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And quite frankly, America and Iran should have gone to war during that time. But because of the escalation efforts on both sides, we prevented World War III during that time. But Trump was under tremendous pressure from his allies and from his donors to start a conflict in the Middle East. So if Trump had won a second term, then he would have started the conflict. I was pretty confident that he would start the conflict if he had won in 2020. But fortunately, he lost. And so now the question then was, what is the likelihood that he would get a second term? Would he win in 2024? And then as I watched the news, it seemed pretty obvious to me that the Democrats were hopeless, that they were not delivering on the promises, that there were a lot of issues. For example, what was happening in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, that was making American voters disillusioned with the Democratic establishment. And so I thought that Trump would have a very good chance of winning in 2024. And if he won in 2024, I think there's a very strong likelihood that he would attack Iran. And so all 3 predictions have panned out.
Just on your predictions, I just want to be clear here. Nikki Haley was key to your prediction about Iran. You said Trump would pick her as his running mate, and as vice president, she would pressure Trump into war with Iran. She's a
Oh my God, what Mehdi Hassan is doing it is just nitpicking. Just because he said one person in that knows Trump will be picked for a certain position and this person didn't get picked, is now saying, oh, do you know who's replaced Nikki Haley? Then you got people like Pete Exed, Susie Wiles, basically even more hawkish people that even Lindsey Graham, even for example. You got more hawkish figures there that are even doing worse than Nikki Haley. So this argument, in my opinion, it just doesn't make sense.
Notorious hawk, but he didn't pick her. And his current vice president, J.D. Vance, is widely seen as a skeptic of this war. So you admit you got that wrong?
Yes, absolutely. So I was thinking of what Trump's electoral strategy would be in 2024. And I think that if he picked Nikki Haley, this would be a tremendous boost to his campaign, because Nikki Haley would be very popular among neocons in Washington, D.C. She would also be very popular among suburban white women. That was key to Biden's victory in 2020. So I made the prediction that he would pick Nikki Haley. But at the same time, I was not completely sure about it because I also felt that J.D. Vance also had a good opportunity to be selected. And I also said during my lecture, making the prediction that Nikki Haley would be his running mate, that depending on whether or not he picked Nikki Haley or J.D. Vance, this would determine how we can foresee or understand Trump's second term. And so if he had picked Nikki Haley, then he would have been he would have been fully committed into the neocon project of regime change throughout the Middle East, of supporting Israel, of establishing American imperial power throughout the world. He didn't pick Nikki Haley. Instead, he picked the complete opposite, who is J.D. Vance, who is America first, who has always been skeptical of American imperial overreach. But not only that, but he also picked Tulsi Gabbard to be his director of national intelligence. And so these are the 2 major skeptics of this war in the Middle East. And
And these picks I made, the JD Vance pick and also Tulsi Gabbard pick, gave a lot of people hope that, oh, these guys I picked are actually gonna be kind of like the restraining figures in the administration. They're gonna be the one to tell them that, okay, this is not in the national interest. We shouldn't do this. We shouldn't do certain things. But that's not been the case. Tulsi Gabbard was at the committee hearing the other day, and she was just saying, the president is the only one that can decide what constitutes an imminent danger. So that just goes to show, how can she be saying like Donald Trump is the one that determines what constitutes imminent danger? She's the head of the DNI. It's our job to say, this is an imminent danger, Mr. President. We need to act on this ASAP. And look at JD Vance right now. He just came back from Islamabad and there was no deal. It failed. Donald Trump sent him there purposefully so that they can fail at that negotiation and he can come in and be like, oh, I'm the peacemaker. I'll come in and I'm going to figure it out. That's why I did it.
And what I will say about picking these two individuals is that it shows that Trump has an off-ramp strategy, where if this war goes sideways and the American public is up in arms and he's losing in the polls, then Trump may decide to pivot back to America First and have JD Vance and Tulsi Gabbard elevated in the administration over individuals such as Marco Rubio and Peter Hegseth.
Yes.
So that, yeah.
I suspect he will blame Pete Hegseth if all of this goes sideways, as it is. Where does China fall into all of this? You're a Chinese Canadian. You're based in Beijing. China clearly stands to gain from a failed U.S. war with Iran. How much of your views are reflective of China's views, the Chinese government's views, the CCP's views?
Whatever I say online could be used against me.
But hold on, they allow you to be on this show. They allow you to be on YouTube. You get past the great firewall that you criticized in that CNN piece. How come?
Look, the reality is that the best way to understand my situation in China is I'm essentially a Martian on Earth talking to Martians back at home in Mars. Like, I am not part of the Chinese system. I'm on YouTube, which is blocked in China.
How do they allow
English.
you to be on YouTube? This is what I'm not understanding. If you're blocked in China, why do they allow you to become... You're very prominent now. You're famous in the West. I'm sure the Chinese government has noticed that.
Well, most Chinese will have access to a VPN device, and that's what I use in order to access the internet.
You wrote for CNN that the Chinese government has built the Great Firewall to monitor and control their citizens' pursuit of truth. Does China control what you say now?
China does not control what I say because, again, I'm not talking to Chinese people. I'm talking to Westerners.
Hold on, that's what most people would say is China's great benefit. They might see, your critics might say, they're using you as a propagandist to come and say this stuff about Iran and the US on behalf of China. That would be what your critics would say.
Look, the reality is that this is a fair and legitimate criticism that I've been contemplating for the past 3-4 weeks. Because, when I first started this YouTube channel like 2 years ago, I was expecting 5,000 viewers who would have a passion for learning, who would be as engaged with literature and geopolitics as I was. And over the past month, I've blown up all across the internet. And I don't think this is organic. But so I wonder if there are some governments or some entities that believe that my message should be amplified. It is possible I'm a useful idiot. And I suspect that there are many entities around the world who would like to amplify my message, including the Chinese government, but also including the Russian government, including some aspects of the American government, including some people who are hostile towards war.
What he's actually saying is he's very mature with his response. He does know that, the Chinese government, they have a very big firewall about like how to control public discourse in China. And the fact that he doesn't criticize the Chinese government, but instead he talks about the events happening in the West. His message is anti-war, and which resonates with a lot of people. A lot of people are just tired of war. And if there's a guy that can tell us or predict what can happen, maybe people can actually just climb down from the escalation ladder and just kind of like see reasoning. Obviously, this guy, as I said, his whole thing is based on game theory, which he studied, and he's been able to predict certain events that has happened, and that's why he's prominent as it is right now. So we've got to give that to him. And as I said, at the core of it, he didn't start to do this as he just wanted a small community that was passionate about learning. But this is the effect of, if you actually saying something that resonates with people, organically your message is gonna go out there. Like, people are just gonna amplify your message and just go out there. As I said, guys, you can go watch this video on Zeteo's channel on YouTube. Mehdi Hassan, he's gotta do what he's gotta do. But yeah, it's a great interview. Go watch it, guys. Please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it, and have a wonderful rest of your day, guys.